Thank you for tuning in to Growing Tech Fast, the condensed podcast in which conversations about growing SaaS startups are had with those who have grown them. Now, today I'm joined by a fantastic chap who has had great experiences within the startup world, the likes of Whipcore, Bazaar Voice, and Plexor, but also with giants such as Google and Adobe. Now, this chap is Tony Markovski, who is currently the Principal Director of Innovation at What If Innovation, a company that is part of Accenture. Tony, absolute pleasure to have you on. Thank you for setting aside some time.
Thank you, and thank you for having me here, Connor. Thank you.
No worries, Tony. My pleasure. Now, I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. I've given you obviously there a brief intro from my side, but I think for the benefit of our listeners, Tony, it'd be fantastic if you could give us a quick overview of who Tony Markovski is and what it is that he does.
Yeah, I'll try to do that. I think it's now 15 or so more years of having been in these companies, large and small, in various constellations. I think there's one thing I've tried to do in them. I think is to sort of actively find out faults in defaults and doing something about them ultimately, which I think I've had the fortune to both experiment with, but also sometimes not been so fortunate to experiment with, which has led to both successes and equally so failures over the years. But over time, and I think this is important for the context of this conversation coming up here around reinventing growth and looking at alternatives of what growth might be. That there might be a few. I'm not sure if I dare to call them ingredients, but parts that you can extract from all these companies and start to cook them up in new ways and try to create teams, create business units, and even companies, and sort of help them. And I think that's the key here. Like, what do you do to become a better company if you're large or small in 2020 and beyond? And I think that's really interesting. So that I hope I have done some parts of at least. So
yeah. Fantastic. Well, the phrase you just used there, Tony, which I know has featured in a lot of our conversations, is that phrase of reinventing growth. I know that's something you're super passionate about, and given a lot of our conversation today is going to be based around that and the key ingredients, as you call them, that make that up. Could you just start off, Tony, by telling us a bit about what reinventing growth means to you?
Yeah. I think, reinvent, there are two interesting words here. Reinvent means you change something, right? And you rethink what the meaning of growth means. And the second word, obviously, is growth itself, which has a tendency to focus only on monetary growth. I'm not saying growth is bad, but I certainly think it needs to be rethought and repurposed even. And I think the reason for it is that, I think we're all quite aware that we as a, planet, businesses within, in the realm of this planet, human individuals in them are facing challenges at an unprecedented scale, I think is the right word. And it's no joke. We laugh a little bit about it here, but social injustices, climate change in the face of the pandemic, which we just discussed actually before this call started, what it means for all of us, as people, businesses, but also for our society, I think. And those big challenges that we're facing, I think, are also, and I think that's what I've tried to change almost, is can you repurpose those challenges into goals and objectives and even reasons for companies for existing, and can you mix that with the traditional sense of growth? Can you have both? Can you do good as a business as well as grow as a result of that? And I think that's what I've tried to experiment and try to find out, is this possible, and how do you do that? So that's what it means to me, and it's sort of to change the way we do things and make companies more human-centric, if you will, and even planet-centric, and try to change them that way.
Yeah, absolutely. So in other words, Tony, to summarize, growth in and of itself is no bad thing, but it needs to be thought of in the grander context of having, being purpose driven, right? Not just in terms of revenue for revenue's sake, but really looking at the purpose behind it. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's a good summary of it, really. Yeah. And I agree.
Cool. Okay, so purpose then, it sounds as if it would be fair to say is one of these key ingredients. Is that right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. It's
Cool.
sort of
Okay.
yeah, because we I think we talk about it a lot, and people talk about purpose, but yeah, it's not often, I think, at the core of most organizations still.
Yeah. No, interesting. No, that's I think that really resonates, and I've been reading recently, Simon Sinek's book Start With Why. That could sometimes be more on a personal level, but I think it really is important. Something I always look for here when I'm hiring is what's people's reason, what's people's purpose, and of course mapping that onto the kind of company and org level. You said really helps us to reinvent growth. So purpose then being the first key ingredient, Tony. In short, start with a nice open question: is why is purpose so important for reinventing growth?
I think it's about asking the big questions, really.
Okay.
I think so. And what is this? I mean, if you look at what the definition of a corporation used to be, and this is, in the 19th century, in fact, at the end of the 19th century, which I quite like, is very simple, really, that people come together to solve problems they can't solve on their own. And I think that's a pretty interesting thing. It's just that these problems that we're trying to solve these days are not really necessarily human problems anymore. They've been morphed into, I think, stakeholder problems for a very select, a small group of people, shareholders, obviously, to maximize growth only. Financial growth, monetary growth. And I think what's interesting with purpose is that some companies are starting to look beyond that and looking at what type of impact they can have on the planet and tackling some of these challenges that we just talked about, social injustice, climate change, and so on, and doing it in their own way. And I think that's what more companies should be doing. And actually, once you figure that out, once you know what the purpose is, it turns into this North Star, like a sort of a beacon, where your behaviors, your incentives that you create in your organization, the processes you end up developing, like you said yourself, the type of people you end up hiring, are those people who can contribute to you reaching that and realizing that purpose. And I think the emphasis there is on the doing again. Purpose,
Yeah.
not theory, I think.
Mm-hmm. No, cool. That makes sense, Tony. And like you were saying there, obviously that. Oh, sorry. Go on.
No, I just think that's a good place to start
Yes.
before we do anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess my question then was going to be around that. So we're saying having this purpose needs to be the starting point, right? So out of interest, where do these businesses that are going wrong, where is it they do go wrong, Tony? Do they lack purpose? Have they not thought about it? Or do they have one but maybe just don't communicate it in the right way?
Yeah, that's a good one.
From your experience.
Yeah, oh God, yeah, that's a good one. I think there's a difference between what's on a PowerPoint and what ends up happening. Starting with the CEO, the C minus ones, and I'm using this word now in a negative way, all the way down, which I think that's one of the problems. In fact, why I think purpose is not realized always, because they're top down. Too much of a top-down and control and hierarchies inside organizations. But yeah, it's one thing talking about it, which I think many are good at, and it's a completely different thing doing it. And I think
Sure.
that's the difference. And then, I mean, there are many factors, I suppose. You have this stakeholder model, like I mentioned earlier, that whoever owns a company today is just in it for the short term usually.
Yeah.
There are changes happening now. You see the CEO of BlackRock and many other companies, banks, RBS, etc. They refuse to invest in companies that don't have a long-term goal, and refuse to invest in companies that don't take responsibility for their actions. And that means reducing the climate impact, etc.
Yeah.
And investing in businesses that are actively about developing, say, tech that does that. So I think change is coming, but there's a huge difference between communication and doing. I think we need both. You need to talk about it and inspire people, obviously, but then, and I hope we get to that soon in the experimentation piece of it, but you need to let to set people free. You need to allow people to do things quickly. 20th century stakeholder model that I think is just designed for maximizing profits.
Interesting.
But that's true.
Yeah.
And the good thing, I just want to add, I want to add something into that I think, profit and purpose need not be opposites. I think, in fact, data and if you look at studies, companies that are purpose-driven and purpose-focused, like Patagonia, they tend to outperform companies that are not by a factor of 6 on the on the stock exchange and so on. So growth comes from purpose. It causes even.
Yeah. So purpose fuels growth rather than, you said, maybe some people's perception of that can conflict, but actually it can go hand in hand. Really interesting what you said as well about BlackRock and RBS. Not invest in those companies without that long-term purpose, long-term goals and vision as well. Okay, cool. So obviously, Tony, as you said, having a purpose is one thing, enacting it and doing it is another matter, and the more tricky matters. So from your side of things, how do you get people then to rally behind a purpose? Is there a magic kind of silver bullet, if you like?
I think not. I wish, but it's super hard. It's really difficult. There are different kinds of leadership. Entrepreneurial leadership that would, where you as a leader, you seek out challenges in organizations, and you rally teams that can come together and create solutions in new ways for these problems, and you rally a little bit of, you end up securing a little bit of investment, and you try to create a solution ultimately and do it quickly. I think that's one kind. Servant leadership is another model of that, where you're not really, you have to think of an inverted pyramid, where you as a leader would be instead serving your employees, and making sure that you create an environment of, say, psychological safety, where people feel safe to bring their whole selves to work. And that's not just, our colors or our sexuality, but also our cognitive diversities. We may not get along with each other or agree on the same approach, but I think the best companies or the best teams have leaders that enable those two often opposing and opposing thoughts and approaches to coexist with each other. And interesting things come out of that. And I think that's the foundation for creativity, ultimately. And that comes back. I mean, if you look at leadership, then empathy, compassion, forgiveness, and allowing people to to do their job, really, to get out of the way, essentially, I think is a key in that, among other things. So that's what you can do if you're a leader, at least.
Okay, so you need to get your leadership model right as well, really. That's something to examine by the sounds of things.
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, it's just insane. Like, I mean, I think the leadership model that I grew up with, in many of the companies you mentioned, that are the sort of the norm and what you strive for, the ideal, if you will. I mean, I mean, the people who created these models are now saying that maybe they're not the right model to take us into the next, decade or the next 100 years or so. We need something new and different.
Okay, cool. Tony, I think I said in my intro, I know you spent a bit of time at Google, right? Now, Google is earmarked and hallmarked as probably one of the best places to work. It's traditionally associated with that. You'd think a purpose-driven organization. So yeah, I'd be really keen to hear your thoughts. What was it like to work at Google, and how did that maybe contrast with some of the kind of smaller scale startups you worked at?
Yeah, this is a tricky question because when I joined, which was in 2012, I believe, Google was still, I mean, it was 30,000 people, so it's not really a startup, but change happened there on a quarterly basis. There was a new initiative, a new challenge that was identified, and I think we did some of the things that I describe here. I mean, people were brought together from all parts of the business at every level, not just the most senior person, but even, an intern would be part of these. And there would be small, fast teams, about 10, 12 people, who would try to identify the problem, but also come up with a a solution and a plan and a strategy to execute that in 3 months. And then that would be presented at the end, and the best ideas were selected and then implemented. So I think, and the beauty of it was that there were a variety of ideas, not just one, but several. And sometimes at the end, even if those two teams were separate, ideas would get combined with each other. And I think someone said variety can only be absorbed by variety. So if you have a huge selection of challenges that are happening outside of your team or your company, you can't really control and anticipate all of them, then the antidote to that is doing what Google did, and that's working on generating as many different solutions as possible to those problems and selecting the best. So yeah. But that being said, Google was also a machine, if you will, at that time, focused on generating profits quite aggressively. So you had both of these, but I think one thing that the other, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Very experimental and change. I mean, again, change happened there quite quickly, similar to some of the at the pace of some of the startups I worked with as well.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, I wanted to just, I guess, while we're just finishing on purpose, really, looking at a startup I know you speak really fondly about. So I'm really keen to touch on that and it's going to help us, I think, in exploring these ingredients as to see what was it that worked so well there. You described it to me, I think, as almost a kind of semi-holy experience being a part of that. So that company was Bazaar Voice, correct?
Yes.
Cool. Well, just talk to us a bit about Bazaar Voice, Tony, and your experience there. And that should be a good way to finish on purpose. It sounds like that stands out really as a purpose-driven organization.
Yeah, I think that all these companies I've worked with, the one that stands out, I think, among all of them is Bazaar Voice, like you said. And for people who don't know what Bazaar Voice is, at the time, it was a company that was founded in 2007, 2008, and in 5 years it IPO'd for $1 billion. So it's one of those unicorn companies. We grew from 0 to 700 people in that time. I played a small part of it in the Nordics and the Benelux at the time. But I think Bazaar Voice had all of these ingredients that came together during a given period of time, and it's almost like as if everything aligns on top of each other. I'm not sure if I can show that properly. Visually, I wish I could draw here, but culture, the people, purpose, the focus on results, wanting to change something in the world, and nobody forced us to. We all wanted to contribute to that, and we felt like we could bring our whole selves to work. We had an extreme degree of autonomy. I mean, I ran a country on my own, for example, and I could pull in the people I needed. I was trusted, always encouraged, always supported, and I felt like I could be myself in that organization. And it was the most amazing time, in creating a difference. We believed, all of us, in fact.
Nice. It sounds as if at Bazaar Voice, Tony, he was doing something that you always kind of mention in our conversations, which is technology for good. And I think that's obviously allowed you to have a fantastic experience there. So, well, we've done quite a bit on purpose. I think we could probably talk on purpose all day, but I do want to get on to, one of the other ingredients that we've spoke about in our conversations. And one of those ingredients is experimentation.
Yeah.
So just talk to us a bit, Tony, about the importance of experimentation in reinventing growth.
Yeah, I think, I mean, again, it comes back to, I think, the simple fact that you need to generate as many ideas as possible, to sort of face these challenges. And there's not just one approach that will work. You can't predict the future. It's impossible. And I think the best way to deal with an unknown future, especially in times like this, is to encourage a bottom-up approach of generating as many ideas as humanly possible that at least, hopefully, is targeted at that purpose, that North Star that you have clearly defined, and so on. And allowing everybody to generate the experiments, to run with them, but also to learn from them. And in order to do that, you need to create psychological safety for people. You shouldn't be fired just because you you fail, or if an idea that you created failed. But over time, you would get better at it once you learn how to create them and run them. And I think the best organizations, again, they are the ones that are allowing their people not just to run with one experiment, but 10 and maybe hundreds. And that's something that would be enabled by technology, really.
Mm-hmm.
So to
Yeah.
do experiments at scale. And that's what digital allows you to do, really. So experimentation is key. And I mean, I'm not sure if I love him, but Jeff Bezos of Amazon obviously said that he wanted to turn Amazon into the largest laboratory in the world. And I think he has succeeded. And if you look at many of these studies, where they try to track companies that are, I think they would call them experimental organizations, where they have this type of culture, and people, everybody, regardless of their level in the organization, are allowed to run with these. They actually outperform all the other ones by a factor of 8, and that's interesting if you track them on the S&P 500. So that's interesting. And I think not experimenting, and I think that's what what makes many big and small companies fail, is that you think some leader, they have a solution, and then they tell everybody to that they can predict the future.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, just on that, Tony, out of interest then, is it a case for you, do you think, where basically the more experimentation, the better? Or is there a tipping point? Like, can you do too much experimentation?
No, I mean, look, I think that's how do I put it? Yeah, the answer is no. I think the answer is no. You experiment because there is a problem. There's something to solve. And what you do with experimentation is not throw hundreds of thousands of pounds on all of them, but the key is to set them off as small, super small experiments, where you just get maybe a small prototype that you can get feedback on as the first step. It could be something you draw on a piece of paper, or a couple of slides if you want to have that. And then the next step is maybe you realize it, you develop it, iterate on it a little bit further. So you can then get customer feedback or employee feedback if it's an internal solution you have. And then, you have checkpoints, and there are ways of doing that, actually. And that's where the innovation process comes in, where you can learn and look at how to assemble almost that and avoid sort of going the wrong direction. And I don't think you can go in the wrong direction, but experiments in themselves will in fact inform the process of innovation and inform ultimately what that North Star should be, because you could be wrong when you define it. Yeah. And I think experimentation is better.
More better. Yeah, cool. Good. Nice and simple in theory again, but always more difficult to enact. But Tony, okay, we spoke a lot there around 2 key ingredients. Conscious of time, I want to make sure if there are any other highlights and ingredients we want to kind of give a quick whistle-stop tour of. So we've done purpose, we've done experimentation. Are there any other, in short, key ingredients that people should leave this podcast being aware of for reinventing growth?
I mean, a given one would be technology, obviously. To enable experimentation, for example, and then remove redundant tasks and so on. Looking at technology would probably be a wise thing to do. I think it can also scale experimentation if you do it well, and allow people to really focus on using what makes us uniquely human, especially now in the age of automation and AI, which is our creativity. And I know a lot of people may not think they're creative or innovative, for that matter. They just want some tasks they can do. But what I've seen is that even in the most repetitive types of jobs at any level, people are quite innovative. They get tired of what they're doing. They have, I think it's inherently human that we're quite beautiful creatures in the fact that we want to make it simpler for us and better, I think, and allowing people to do that and use technologies that are out there is quite important.
Yeah, I remember. I think
to allow us to focus on say communication and other things.
Yeah, I remember you saying to me, Tony, that technology is kind of the only thing that is different between the Stone Age and now. I thought it was quite an interesting way
Well,
to look at it.
it's a bit of, I mean, it's obviously a bit exaggerated, I think,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I think to a large degree that's true. And again, how we wield that and how we use it, I think is also what is an enabler of purpose ultimately. I mean, if we want to have air we can breathe, and we don't want to have millions of people have been forced to leave their homes and so on in a near future, we probably have to invest more in technology and especially how we use that technology for good. And I think we have all of that available at our fingertips today. And there's another lovely thing, I think, when you say that, we're quite imaginative as creatures, I suppose. And for the first time, maybe in history, the technologies that are out there would actually be able to keep up with our imaginations. We can realize much of the stuff we can come up with today. And that's very helpful for me, at least.
Great. Well, it's been really, really good, Tony, chatting with you again. I think we could go all day, but I think just one final question you can just sum up in 30 seconds, really, I guess, is if there's anyone out there at the moment, any business leader, company leader, or anyone within a company who thinks, you know what, we really do need to think about how we reinvent ourselves and our growth. What would just be, if you could give them one piece of advice, one action to take away, what would that be?
Oh, that's a very, very good question. I think it's so unique, to be honest. It's so unique. I think it's super tempting to say that, here's a one size fits all model. In the past, I think I was keen to say, look, do this. But today, I would probably spend some time, and I don't say that to try to get away from the question. Of course. I truly mean that you need to really listen and understand first, and it's so unique. And once you've done that, I think then you can start to come up with what type of ingredients and which amount you need to apply them to that particular situation. So that would probably be my answer.
Good. Well, reach out to Tony or at What If Innovation for some help. Might be able to give you a hand. Well, Tony, look, so good today, unpacking all of that with you. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. Likewise. Lovely to be here. Thanks, Connor.
No worries. My pleasure. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.